Welcome to the Love of the Star podcast. I am Bobby Belt, Dallas Cowboys insider for 105.3 The Fan of Dallas. I am joined, as always, by former Super Bowl winning NFL scout Brian Broaddus. He is now the co-host of the G-Bag Nation, 2 to 7 p.m. Central, Monday through Friday on 105.3 The Fan. And he is also the pre- and post-game co-host on the Dallas Cowboys radio network. Brian Broaddus, how are you today, sir?
I am doing well, Robert. Thank you very much. And yes, you hear the voice also of mentioned Bobby Belt. I always like to talk about you, brag on you a little bit, Bobby. You say you are the insider. You do a great job of that. You do also have a show with Sean and RJ, 5:30 to 10, Monday through Friday on 105.3 The Fan. Again, co-host of the Draft Show and soon to be award winner of the host of Love of the Star. So always happy to be with you, Robert.
Exactly. We'll get our awards soon enough. I don't know what award it will be exactly, but
we're going to have an award. We're going to make up an award for something.
For the best fans, the best show fans. That's the
award.
Yeah,
no, you know what? You're right about that. You're absolutely right about that. You know, the fans who listen to this show on when we put it out, the numbers and stuff, we can't thank you guys enough for everything you've done for me and Bobby. It really, it's one of the best things. I love doing this show. I love doing the show with you, Bobby, and I'm just glad that the fans appreciate it as well.
I do too. It's always a good time doing this. And today we are going to continue our roster inventory. So taking a look at where the Cowboys roster stands as we get closer to training camp. Next segment, we're going to dive into some of the guys that could be breakout candidates this year for the Cowboys. Maybe some guys that have a shot to regress. But Brian, as we take a look at this roster inventory, we've already done the backfield. We did quarterbacks and running backs. Last episode, we did pass catchers, so we touched on the receivers and the tight ends. Today, we will take a look at the offensive line, which, depending on, you know, how varied it is, there's always the initial 53. That's what people tend to call it these days instead of the final 53. But generally, 9, 10, something like that is the number of offensive linemen that the team carries. In the last decade, I think they've carried as many as 11, which is a really high number. And then they've carried as few as 8 before. But as we look at this, let's probably operate from the assumption that it's going to be 9. And then if they need an extra one, 10. But let's look at how this all breaks out. So currently on the roster, the Cowboys have 15 offensive linemen. And so I'll run through those names really quickly. Awesome Richards, Tyler Smith, Alex Taylor, Matt Waletzko, Josh Ball, Earl Bostic, Tyron Smith, Terrence Steele, TJ Bass, Chuma Edoga, Matt Farniok, Zach Martin, Tyler Biotish, Brock Hoffman, Alec Lindstrom. So as we take a look at this group, there are a few slam dunks, obviously. Tyler Smith is on this football team. Tyron Smith and Terrence Steele are on this football team. Zach Martin is on this football team. Tyler Biotish is on this football team. Those are your 5 right up front. So that's half of the list right there. So let's kind of, before we work down into who else makes the rest of the roster, those 5 names we just listed, if you talk about putting the best 5 out there, the fact that those 5 feel like the slam dunk, is that the starting offensive line and we just don't know what spot each of those guys is going to play yet? Tyler Smith, Tyron Smith, Terrence Steele, Zach Martin, and Tyler Biotish?
Yeah, I think you're onto something there, Bobby. I don't know if we got a lot of clues during the OTAs and mini camps. It seemed like that there were days where Tyler Smith was guard, and then there were other days he was tackle. Tyron Smith was on the right side, and then he was on the left side. I know talking to people in the organization about Steele that he is, usually these guys coming off a knee injury, they're limited going into the practices and stuff like that. It seems like to me that they're going to integrate him more into the early part of practices. So hopefully we'll get to see Terrence Steele out there. But I don't think we have a really clear feeling, and I don't think we're going to have a clear feeling for another month until we get to Oxnard and see exactly, what they're thinking. Is Tyron Smith clearly your left tackle? Is Tyler Smith clearly your left guard? I don't think we're to that point yet, but I know in 4 weeks' time when we get out there and practice, we'll have a much better understanding of where that's going to be.
So when you look at those 5, that's the guys who are slam dunks. We've got 4, maybe 5 roster spots left for the remaining 10 guys. I feel like, Brian, that just given what we've seen from the last couple of years, what we saw during the offseason program, I feel pretty comfortable that their top reserves to them are Matt Waletzko and Matt Farniak. Do you think that those 2 guys are probably good bets to have spots here?
No, absolutely. The fact that Farniak, last year, opening day, Tampa Bay, injury, to McGovern, and then all of a sudden, who was in the game? It was Matt Farniak was in the game. And so to me, I think they like the versatility. I feel like that Matt Farniak can maybe play all the offensive line positions if he had to. Mm-hmm. And so with that being said, Farniak is in this mix. I think that I think Waletzko is in this mix. I think that it's going to come down to, I think with Adoga, excuse me. I think with Adoga, I think it might come down to him and maybe even Josh Ball. I feel like they're going to protect Awesome Richards, and maybe he will be the last guy. So I would put him as the very last guy. But I don't know. Will always does a really good job of protecting himself. If you listen to our broadcast, these podcasts we talk about, I think he did the same thing with Ronald Jones. You get a veteran player, you put him in the mix. If, it helps you in those preseason games to have a veteran offensive lineman in there when you're trying to evaluate other players. You don't, you're not, these guys are, they're going to have opportunities, and you don't want there just to be complete busts on the front of the offensive line in these preseason games. But I think with him, they're looking at it as, okay, if none of these young guys show up and do well in training camp, I think that's where you'll see Adogba be involved with what's going on.
So let's try to, I guess, whittle down some of the cuts. I guess I think when you just look at, in all likelihood, it's an uphill battle for Earl Bostick. The
I think so, yeah.
Out of Kansas. So
let me say something. Let me say something real quick, Bobby, about this. And what happens is and when you were going through the numbers earlier, and I should have jumped in on this, when you talk about keeping 11 or 10 these offensive linemen, offense and defensive linemen are the hardest positions to find during the season. You're always going to go heavy at those positions if you have to go one more guy, because the likelihood of, like, if you have an injury, then you have to go out and get a guy or go poach somebody off a practice squad. And it just doesn't always work out. You're better off carrying extra offense and defensive linemen, and in the Cowboys case, the extra offense and defensive linemen might turn into a surplus to where you move on and you can move one of these guys for a back or another position, a linebacker or something like that you might need. So always in the team building aspects of everywhere I've ever been, we never really wanted to part ways with these offense and defensive linemen because it was just so hard to find them during the season, like in week 5, week 7, week 10, when you needed one.
When you look at Bostick, you're right. I think that he's somebody that they'd like on the practice squad. He's got tackle guard flexibility. I think that he's somebody that they'd like to have at their disposal. I just don't know that it's enough to keep a roster spot over some of these other guys. Alex Taylor, a guy they signed late last year, he does have a little bit of NFL experience, but I mean, that's somebody that is pretty much tackle specific. I don't know that that's going to win the day when you consider how many of these other guys are position flexible. Let's look at the centers really quickly behind Biotish. It's Brock Hoffman and Alec Lindstrom. Lindstrom, I know he's a little different because he's a left-handed snapping center. That's not very common. I think last year, it felt like there was an issue with snapping to rush. And I don't know if that was related to he's left-handed and that's just different. But there was that. Do you think they would like to keep a pure center on the active roster? Or with this number crunch here, do you think they'd say, look, we've got other guys we like. we're just going to have to take the flexibility of Farniak, and that's our backup center.
I think that's what they're going to do. I think Farniak's the backup center. I think they trust him with his ability to play, like I mentioned, all 5 positions. I'm glad you confirmed that, with how he plays. I don't think to me, the thing with Lindstrom, and maybe it's a practice squad situation for him, I physically looked at him. He doesn't look different. Usually guys that have been here a year and you put him in the weight room, with Josh Ball, guys like that, they just don't physically look different. And that always bothered me when you have a whole year to kind of all you do is, eat right, be in the weight room, get a workout, develop yourself a little bit. I just don't see physically a different looking guy here. And that bothers me a little bit about him.
So we've confirmed, or we feel like pretty confident about 7 of these guys. We've made 4 cuts here. So there's 2 spots left, maximum 3. And we've got 4 guys, Brian.
Yeah.
We've got Chuma Edoga, TJ Bass from Oregon, who I know they think really highly of.
Yeah.
Josh Ball and Awesome Richards. The one thing that stands out to me about these 4 names, if you really wanted to keep 3 and say we've got to keep 3, then you only have to make 1 cut. If you have to make 1 cut, even if they like Bass, do you think they look at it and say, look, Bass here is the only guy who's confined really to just one position. Edoga, Ball, Richards, we can get them to play inside or outside.
Yeah, to me, Bass is really interesting, and that's one of those ones.
He was in for Martin during.
I know, and that's what's interesting to me is they thought enough of him to put him in there and take a look at him. This reminds me of basically, if you and kind of work with me on this one, if you will. Mm-hmm. But this reminds me of Ridgeway. All of a sudden you've got a guy that you feel like maybe this guy's got some promise. They drafted Ridgeway, the tackle from Arkansas last year.
Yep.
And then all of a sudden, this is a guy that I was surprised that went undrafted. I was surprised that Bass went undrafted. And this might be one of those things where all of a sudden you're sitting there and you're one of those teams and you're looking for your 10th offensive lineman. And you're like, well, hell, our grades on him were good enough to draft. They got film on him playing in 3 preseason games. The Cowboys have to be careful about how much they show him if they really want to protect him and keep him around, if they want to try and get him through waivers. I would kind of think that maybe they would try and keep him instead of keeping a veteran guy. You know what I'm saying there? That, yeah. Hey, let's keep 3 young offensive linemen and see if we can develop all 3 of them because they've gotten Matt Waletzko has gotten better. He's gotten better. The thing that scares me again too is the change in the offensive line coach. I think Joe Philbin actually did a pretty damn good job with these young guys. So I think that that's the Mike Solari's mission now, or the assistant line coach job is to make sure that guys like Awesome Richards and Matt Waletzko and those guys, Bass, that don't get a lot of work, maybe during the week, can develop in these practices and the opportunities they get running scout team even against a Cowboy defensive line that we feel like is pretty good.
Yeah, and so let's assume they do keep Bass. If they do,
maybe they make him a center too. Maybe they cross-train him,
Sure. I think that if they keep Bass, that means they're keeping 10. So at that point, you're talking about either cutting a veteran or cutting your 5th round pick, Awesome Richards. So let's say they keep Bass. Which of Richards, Ball, or Edoga do you think is on the chopping block?
I think I would get rid of Edoga if it was me. I think I would move on from him. To me, I know what Edoga is. Okay, yeah. I know my pro department knows what Edoga is. I'm not parting ways with Awesome Richards. I'm sorry. Maybe 2 years from now, we'll all look back and go, Broadus, you were wrong about Awesome Richards. They've taken these offensive tackles and stuff from these directional schools and, Northern Illinois and Central Michigans and Toledo's and marshals and all that. This kid played legitimate football at North Carolina. And you watched him play against Clemson and Florida State and Miami and teams with Notre Dame and teams with really good edge rushers. And he more than held his own. And this guy's got really good feet. You talk to people in the organization. All they need to say is he needs to get stronger. Maybe he's the 9th or 10th guy. I am not putting him back out on the street. I'm sorry. I'm not going to, now maybe he'll look like butt when we play, in the training camp and the practices and preseason. But these young linemen, you got to just stick with them. You got to hang with them. You got to make sure that they develop and they get training and they get coaching and they understand what they're doing. But there's a reason why they picked Awesome Richards where they did. And I totally agree with what they did there. Totally agree. I think, I just funny. I had a chance again. Name drop this one. I talked to Will McClay about him. I told Will, I said, man, I love Awesome Richards. And Will says, man, we do too. He just needs a little bit more strength training and, he'll be better. But the athletic ability, the feet, the length, all those things fit into what they want in an offensive tackle.
So as we look at this then, take a look at the offensive line, at least tentatively. This is not a hard and fast rule, but at least tentatively, this is what it sounds like you're looking at, Brian, for the offensive line grouping, that they would keep Tyler Smith, Tyron Smith, Terrence Steele, Zach Martin, Tyler Biotish. Those are your big 5 up front.
5, yeah.
And then your reserves would be Matt Farniak, Matt Wiletzko, TJ Bass, Awesome Richards, and Josh Ball.
Man, yeah, the Josh Ball is the one that's the question for me.
Ball or Edoga is really
Ball or Edoga. That's where this is going to come down to. I think the others, we'll see what happens with Bass. But man, that's a big man. It's 325 pounds. I guarantee you, he was on some people's draft boards. And Dallas fought for him and got him in free agency. And you put somebody out there, a young offensive lineman on the street for waivers to be claimed, you're dancing, and they're dancing in the fire a little bit there.
Well, and let's remember one very important aspect of this when we're talking about back end of the roster and cuts being made. When you talk about TJ Bass and you talk about Awesome Richards and them being in play with Josh Ball, or even Chuma Edoga. Remember, Mike Solari, your new offensive line coach, did not pick Josh Ball. We know he at least had some input on Edoga, Richards, and Bass.
Right.
And so there's some level of approval there that does not exist for Josh Ball. He may like Ball, but at least we know for certain he has given his approval to those 3.
Yeah, absolutely. And, these line coaches, it's kind of funny. Tyler Smith worked out really, really well, and we were hearing that the previous regime really, was not too high on Tyler Smith, and that seemed to work out pretty well for them.
Exactly. You are listening to the Love of the Star podcast. The Love of the Star is an Audacy podcast. You can find it on the Audacy app or wherever you get your podcasts. All right, Brian, we're going to talk here now about some of the guys that we look at for this season that could be breakout candidates for the Cowboys, and maybe some guys that we expect to regress a little bit, whether it's just because of age or maybe they played above their heads a little bit last year. So let's go through these names a little bit, some of the guys that we look at. If you were going to look at one prime candidate for regression, a guy that you think, whether it's we're going to see a veteran continue to make a decline, or maybe he's going to enter the beginning of decline, or just maybe somebody playing a little bit more down to earth, what guy do you look at and say that's a prime candidate in 2023 for the Cowboys to be a regression guy?
We had this discussion on our show on 105.3 The Fan. I know you guys had the discussion as well, I believe, this morning, talking about regression guys and stuff like that. And it's funny, we came up with the name of Tyron Smith as a guy that might be one of those that are we starting to see the end of Tyron Smith? He clearly wasn't as good as he needed to be. I thought he was going to fill in very well at right tackle. Him and Zach Martin. Martin actually regressed with Tyron Smith playing next to him, But maybe with Tyron Smith back on the left side, it might help him in that way. But I think we're starting to see the end of Tyron Smith. And I worry about that's one of the reasons why I'm not so interested or very quick into moving Tyler Smith from left tackle. I'm more interested in trying to keep developing Steele at right tackle. Hopefully everything goes well there. It looks like it is going in the right direction. Him and Britt Brown doing a nice job, and Duke, those guys, all helping. Yeah. But I kind of feel like that maybe that would be one on the offense. The defensive one, could we start to see a regression of Dorrance Armstrong? Could that be the one where all of a sudden Sam Williams is playing very, very, very well, and then all of a sudden Dorrance Armstrong kind of becomes a kind of an afterthought? Yeah, I believe he had 8 sacks last year.
8.5, yeah.
Do you expect him to have 8.5 sacks this year? I think that might be a little bit of a stretch right now. So those are kind of two guys that I think that we might see a little regression from.
It's interesting. Dorrance Armstrong last year had 8.5 sacks and 16 quarterback hits. The year before, he had 5 sacks and 12 quarterback hits. So just looking at the stat sheet, it would say he's getting better in 2022.
Yeah.
I don't think he was better last year. I think there was a little bit of box score padding at times. Not that he's doing anything to manipulate. It's just I think he got some cleanup sacks. He was fortunate in a couple areas. I thought he was actually better in 2021. So the fact that I think he played above where we would have expected, I don't think he was an 8.5 sack type of player.
Yeah.
So I think that'll naturally regress. And then you consider the potential for Sam Williams to come on, like you mentioned, and take away some of his snaps. Because I think specifically Sam Williams not only has the chance to be better against, as a pass rusher this year, I think he's already better against the run than Armstrong. Then I think that you're looking at, Armstrong is absolutely a guy that will, in this box score, definitely regress.
Do you think there might be some regression with Jordan Lewis coming off an injury?
Yeah, because, Jordan Lewis he's not quite 30 yet, but, he's getting close. He's already a smaller guy. He's not a burner of any sort of type. Wow, he's going to be 28 this year. I thought he was a little older than that. But, the Liz Frank injury, he was already not exactly a speed guy, a little undersized. You look at some of the numbers in the corner room right now. You've already got Diggs, Bland, Gilmore. To me, that's your easy top 3. And then, you've got guys that you've invested in. Like, I know he's struggled and he's been a disappointment, but they've invested in Kelvin Joseph. They've invested in Nashawn Wright. How much of an opportunity do those guys get? They seem to like Eric Scott, the guy they drafted this year from Southern Miss. They made a deal to go get him. Even though it's a day 3 guy, they made a deal to go get him. And there's some cap savings to be had if you let go of Jordan Lewis. So yeah. I kind of wonder if Jordan Lewis is even assured being here. But absolutely, if he is here, I think it's going to be a much quieter year from him than we're used to.
Well, I think that we're all, this is going to sound even stranger. Could there be regression from Duron Bland from the rookie year, how great he was in the rookie year? Duron Bland was around a lot of balls, knocking them down, interceptions. Could Duron Bland kind of come back down to earth after being, I know we're all heaping very high praise on him for the way he's played. So I that's kind of one of those wonders I have is, would it be considered regression if he just plays to kind of like, wow, we really didn't know a whole lot about Duron Bland, and he's a good player, but last year, man, he looked like a guy that if you had to start Duron Bland at corner, you weren't feeling too terrible about that.
No, I think that's actually a really interesting name to throw out because sophomore slumps happen. You have guys who don't play as well in their second year. He's I'm guessing we haven't seen the combinations obviously yet, but I'm guessing he's your nickel guy. That it's going to be Gilmore and Diggs on the outside, and Bland steps in and plays the nickel. Which, man, he really did an admirable job. I'm curious, did you think he was better inside or outside last year?
Inside.
Okay, so he's playing somewhere where He showed some good ability last year.
That's what makes him unique to me. I mean, the fact that he could play inside, outside, and I don't think you could do that with Jordan Lewis. I think Jordan Lewis is just an inside player,
Yeah. Well, and I remember we talked about this right after the draft. You and I talked that year, and I remember I told you, I was like, man, I'm hearing big buzz out of that building that they think Duron Bland, they got a massive steal there where they picked him. And so I know they were excited about him. His process, I think, is something that they really love. That he's not just a talented player. He is a hard worker, and he's somebody who's picked up being a pro very, very quickly. So I do think it makes sense to ask about him as somebody who could regress just because of his, the way he bursted on the scene. But I think that he's going to perform well. I think he's going to be somebody that maybe he doesn't take a huge leap because he played so well his rookie year. But I don't think he's necessarily going to be somebody that's going to regress. Do you think we're looking at DeMarcus Lawrence potentially as a candidate to regress?
Sure. You could put him in with Tyron Smith. You could put him in you're starting to get veteran player. I think maybe that Lawrence might be the guy that if others start to show a little bit better, that this time next year we could talk about him potentially being moved on because of money or something like that. He's going to play at a high level because he plays the run well, and he's going to just needs to stay healthy. That's always the thing with him, is that when he's out there in the field, he's going to make 2 or 3 of those tackle for losses that were just really instinctual plays. And so, but I think that I would lump him in with that group of, lump him in the group with the Tyron Smiths, the veteran guy that we might be seeing towards the end. How about, can I throw one more name at you? Yeah. I'm interested in what you think. Could Tyler Biotish regress?
Ooh.
From him, how well he played. He's kind of like you mentioned, like with Bland, played at a really, he made the Pro Bowl as an alternate, right? So
yeah. It feels like people forgot. So
he got better as the year went on.
And I was doing some research. I was going back listening to some old shows we had done in December, the morning show, and I had forgotten. I was going back and listening. I had forgotten how much we were in a little bit of a panic. He rolled his ankle at the end of the year. We were like, is he going to play against Tampa? Yeah. How big of a deal is that going to be? So he was absolutely huge. What's interesting is, think about, he's not going to have the same guy. Tyler Smith played left tackle all last year. So you're talking about changing who's next to him at left guard. And we just mentioned, could Zach Martin be somebody who regresses a little bit just because of given where he's at in his career and his age? That alone would seem to indicate, if you're talking about a new guy to your left and a potentially regressing, aging player to your right, that alone, the guys bracketing you, if they're struggling, I would imagine that would naturally set up for Tyler Biotish to have a little bit of a letdown. Yeah,
he played so well, and I remember I was on with Cowboy Break with Nick Eatman and Amber Garcia and Derek Eagleton, and we were coming out of Oxnard, and we were talking about guys that potentially needed to be replaced, and his name came up as a guy that, hey, we think you have to do better there, but man, he got better every single week that he played. So maybe some natural regression there. Maybe, hopefully he continues to rise to the occasion. But, he might be like Bland, that, man, he played so well that if he just plays okay, it's noticeable.
All right, let's talk about some guys who are candidates to break out potentially. I know you and I have mentioned Damone Clark as an interesting guy. Sam Williams seems like a natural fit. We kind of referenced him when talking about Dorrance Armstrong. Here's another one throw your way, just because of how limited he was last year. Is Jalen Tolbert a candidate, you think, to break out and really have a big bounce back second year?
Well, I know you're hoping about it listening to your show this morning. You were talking about,
please, Jalen Tolbert.
Yeah, Jalen Tolbert. I know last year during the draft, you were championing him. I felt like I was championing him, but not to the level of what you were championing him. But yeah, they need, matter of fact, I was talking to some guys in the organization, much like you do, about this. And they were saying, I said, did you guys purposely not address the wide receiver until the 7th round because of Jalen Tolbert? And this guy goes, absolutely. We want Jalen to have every opportunity to show what he can do. And they felt like that. I asked a question about, well, because he missed OTAs and minicamp, and then you guys threw him in the deep end of the pool and he couldn't swim. And I go, is that a theory? And they go, that would be correct. And so I felt good. I asked a question that got the right answer. But yeah, this is where they're at with him. They need him to step up. And all indications are that the work he's done in the DAC yard, the work he's done in the off season with the strength and conditioning program, the work that he's done, in the OTAs and mini camps, that he is better equipped to go in there and be a confident football player when we get to Oxnard. So as you double-crossed your fingers, I think there's a lot of people that share the absolute same sentiment that you do about getting him done, getting him going the right way.
Would you consider Osa Odigizua a guy who has already broken out, or is he somebody who you think has a chance to break out this year?
I think Osa's kind of been a breakout guy already. I really, really do. I think that he just needs to, the down in, down out. He's starting to get that. He starts off really, really well, and then he kind of faded a little bit. But I think down in, down out, he's going to continue to improve. So I think he's already kind of breaking out. I think whoever you play next to him, whether it's Mozzie Smith or whoever, I think those guys are going to benefit from how well Osa is going to play. I think he's really buying into what Dan Quinn and AD and those guys are selling over there on the defensive line. I think his technique has gotten better. I expect him to have a really good year. Can I throw a guy at you on
Yes.
this potential breakout?
Mm-hmm.
How about Israel McQuamu?
I really like Israel McQuamu. If he were to get the opportunities, then absolutely, it's going to be so deep back there. The Cowboys have really good depth at safety, which is where McQuamu had been largely, but he's been working a lot more at corner lately. But even still there, they've kind of got their top 3 solidified, like we mentioned, and you've got the veteran in Jordan Lewis. How much do they want to keep? How much deference is he going to get? So there are those aspects of it that you have to consider. But I think McQuamu is a very capable player. I don't know about you, Brian. If somebody went down and they said coming into the game, a corner went down, it's coming into the game is Israel McQuamu, I don't have a panic. I don't feel I'm not going to feel afraid. Even if he's not great, I don't think teams are going to be able to just go seek him out and pick on him the way they did Kelvin Joseph against Green Bay last year. And so I think Israel McQuamu is a great name.
Yeah, I think that the fact that they've got him playing some nickel slot and on the outside and stuff too with that length, I just trust Dan Quinn and Joe Witt and Al Harris and those guys. I think that they're going to put him in the right spot to have success. I really, really do.
You have expressed your fascination, I guess. I won't say a love, but a fascination with the potential with Peyton Hendershot and his ability to stretch the field. Obviously, Hendershot, Ferguson, Schoonmaker, they're all going to be involved in this tight end race here. Who do you think, Brian? I think these are 2 guys you've talked about as guys you think have the potential to do something bigger this year if they tap into it. Who do you think has a better chance to break out? Peyton Hendershot in the tight end group or Chauncey Golston on the defensive line?
Oh, I love Chauncey Golston. I think Chauncey Golston's another buy-in guy. I think they're looking for a backup behind Osa Odigizua. And so I think Chauncey Golston playing as that 3 technique, the guy's going to work hard in the weight room. He's going to be prepped. He's going to be smart. If you watched him at Iowa as an edge, he played really good with his hands. He was a hard guy to get to the outside on. You can't run the ball on him. I could see him playing on that outside shoulder of the guard and getting up the field, kind of just being a disruptive player. So I'm going to vote Chauncey Golston as that guy of the 2 you just gave me.
So there are some players to potentially watch for breakouts. And maybe
How about you? Which way did you go? Which way
I
did
would
you go?
Golston. They thought really highly of Golston the entire time, and he had some injuries, and they've been asking him to do some different stuff than he was asked to do at Iowa. So I think there's been a transition period. But I think you're right. That's a buying guy. To them, I think they feel like Golston is one of the handful of young players that they could say, go put on 20 pounds of muscle. All right, drop it.
Yeah, he'll do it.
He'll do it. He's going to do it.
Yeah.
And so I think they love the work ethic, and they know they can ask him to do. He is very much like a Tyrone Crawford for them.
Exactly.
They trust that he will do anything and buy in.
Exactly.
You're listening to the Love of the Star podcast. The Love of the Star is an Audacy podcast. You can find it on the Audacy app or wherever you get your podcasts. All right, Brian, it is now time for our Dean Julia Love of the Star mailbag. It's where we turn things over to our dear, sweet listeners. First question here. Let's go with this one from Billy. And maybe this is a little bit like a breakout candidate. Who is this year's Duron Bland, a rookie who doesn't initially start, but maybe becomes a solid contributor by the end of the year?
Oh,
I've got my answer. If you
go ahead. Yeah. Well, I'll tell you what. Hunter Lipke seems like a guy. Asking for draft picks or guys that are just
a rookie who could
just a rookie.
Yeah.
They're sure using Hunter Lipke a lot in a lot of different ways. And, as that one back runner, we'll see if he does the fullback stuff. I haven't seen him do any edge or wing or any of that kind of stuff yet. But I wonder if he's going to be that guy that we're really not talking about a whole heck of a lot. That, okay, they got a role for him, but then all of a sudden they find out he could do a lot of other different things. You know me, I love Luke Schoonmaker. I think that Luke Schoonmaker, if you ask me which rookie could have be the most productive, this is one of those things. It's as you would say, the receipts. You could go back and get the receipts on this one.
Yeah.
But I really do like Luke Schoonmaker. I know a lot of people love Mozzie Smith and what Mozzie Smith can do, and I think Mozzie Smith is going to be just fine. I think Michigan underutilized Luke Schoonmaker as a receiver. I think he's going to show people that he could play, but that Hunter Lipke is a guy that keep an eye on him because he keeps getting a lot of reps, or he did in the OTAs and mini camps with the ones. They were finding spots for him to be on the field. So maybe they have a plan for him.
All right. So my answer is going to be very similar to Duron Bland. It is going to be a day 3 pick from the Mountain West Conference, and it's Junior Fehoko. Look, when we talk about how much trust we give to Dan Quinn and how much we believe in him, that was about the most excited he looked that entire draft weekend is when they got Fehoko. And you just hear there's a lot of excitement for him with that player and just the energy that he plays with and all the different things that they think he can do. They honestly, if you go out there and you saw it out at some of these offseason practices, I'll be interested to see exactly how it looks when they get to Oxnard. But you look at the fact that he was in a 3-point stance on the edge. He was on a 2-point stance standing up. They play him at 3 technique. They are asking him to do a lot of different things. And I think that they believe this is somebody who can handle all of these different things we're asking him to do. Stand up and rush from, the edge in a 3-point stance, or, attack as a 3 technique. And so I think they believe in him a great deal. And just with defensive line rotations, I think Fehoko is a guy who is going to catch some attention, and somebody that Dan Quinn has a very clear, defined idea of how he wants to use him.
No love for Overshown, huh? Neither one of us showed any love there on that one.
I like Overshown, okay.
They're kind of light at linebacker. There's a lot of questions.
They're very high on him.
Yeah, I know, but they're very light as far as what do you even know about some of your starters, and what do you even know about some of your backups? I mean, he's got a shot to kind of show up and do some things.
Absolutely. I mean, he's going to be given the chance. And this is somebody who at Texas was asked to do everything. I mean, this is somebody who rushed occasionally. He played linebacker. He played safety. He did nickel a little bit when he was there early at Texas. He is a true, can play all 3 levels of the defense. And that's why they were so high. We talked to Mitch LaPointe on DallasCowboys.com on day 3 of the draft, their assistant director of college scouting. And he is is Mitch director of college scouting now? He is the director, I believe. At this
they got
point.
all kind.
Exactly. He's a very important person in their scouting group. But Mitch LaPointe told us that was somebody they debated taking it when they took Schoonmaker. Like, they were willing to take Overshown in the second round, and that was one of his favorite picks of the draft. So definitely a player that's worth watching, and somebody who can do a lot of different things. Next question here from Brian and Cheryl Burkett. It says, keep reading tweets stating Mike McCarthy is under pressure this season to keep his job. Do you guys see it that way? I personally think McCarthy is finally getting to do what he wants and is confident in himself and his staff. No more pressure than any other year. I think it's pressure, Brian, from the sense that the fact that he is finally able to do what he wants to do, and that is the way he described it. You heard him a couple weeks ago, said we're finally running the offense that we want to. I think this is, hey, we've had a couple disappointments in the way we've ended the season the last couple of years. So this is your last gasp, and you're going to get to go out your way. You can either save it or have it go the other way. So I do agree that he's finally getting to do what he wants to do and have control. But I think that only speaks to the pressure he's under in terms of his job security.
Yeah, I asked this question again on our radio show on 105.3 The Fan, the G-Bag Nation. I asked my guys in the sports mix. I do that every Friday. And I said, is the pressure on Mike McCarthy, hot seat pressure, media-driven or Cowboy front office driven? And we all kind of came to the realization that it might be more of a media-driven thing than the Cowboys. Clearly, he has to find a way to, have a successful season, have some success in the playoffs. If they bow out again in the divisional round where they don't do anything on offense and all, and he's a primary play caller, or if in fact the offense doesn't get any better, if they waste a year of Dak and waste a year of CeeDee Lamb and they really never figured anything out for Pollard, that kind of stuff. Maybe that's the thing that might ultimately get him. I think Mike McCarthy is going to be back. I do. Now, the problem is that he's in a situation where he's kind of put all his eggs in one basket, and if it doesn't work, well, then he'll probably suffer the consequences. But they might figure out some things with his offense, but then still move on from him. Maybe there's Bobby. The thing that worries me so much about the Cowboys is the turnover on the coaching staff on the offensive side of the ball. That's the big concern for me. It's not the players. It's not Mike McCarthy, the play caller. It's how many things got turned over, So I'm kind of like, I don't think their pressure is on him, but I think he has to, I say that the pressure's on him. I think he has to do something different. I think that they have to show that they could still move the ball, they could still score points, but they've got to find a way not to get eliminated in the playoffs.
Similar question, or along the same topic, an offshoot. Joel Armstrong is asking, which player will possibly benefit / suffer the most from the change in the offensive coaching staff this season? I mean, the easy answer here is Dak Prescott either will suffer Dak Prescott will probably be one of these answers. Either Dak is going to suffer the most or benefit the most from the changes. But if you're going to ask me, given the scheme, who's somebody, and the changes that they've had on the coaching staff, who's somebody that is the likeliest candidate to, in a vacuum, have success from it or increase success from it, and who's likeliest to have decreased success, I think the person most likely to benefit from it is Brandon Cooks, from what he's seen the last couple of years.
Yeah.
It's this passing game is going to see a lot of, there's going to be two threats. This isn't just going to be CeeDee Lamb and a bunch of guys. They need to have a second passing threat. Yeah. I think Brandon Cooks is going to get that. And the guy who it sounds like from all the discussion, and we'll see how it plays out, we'll see what the combination looks like, but the guy I think who has the chance to most suffer from the staff changes and the scheme changes here is Terrence Steele. If they end up sticking Terrence Steele at left guard, I don't know what.
Please don't do that. Kid's done a great job at right tackle. Him and Zach Martin together are a great combination running the football. Please don't do that to Terrence Steele. Let him play right tackle where he needs to play.
Yeah, I think that's exactly what it is. Now, when you look at, if we're looking at benefit versus, who's going to struggle the most, do you think these changes benefit or harm Tony Pollard more?
That's a good question. And when you usually say it's a great question, you're thinking about your answer and you're thinking about how to put it. I kind of feel like, though, with Tony, they need to get Terrence Steele back at right tackle. They need to figure out what's going on at left guard, whether it's Tyler Smith or whoever. I think it actually, all the changes will help. Maybe help in a way that they went and got Schoonmaker. I think he's a better point of attack blocker. We'll see what Hunter Lipke can do as maybe a fullback in this offense. The fact that I think that Brian Schottenheimer has a feel for how to run the ball or want to run the football, I think will help Tony Pollard. We'll see with Mike Solari how that all works out. But in the big picture, I think it actually helps him. I think it helps him because, like I say, McCarthy appears to want to do things in a way to help Dak with running game. Schottenheimer can surely scheme that running game. Solari, everybody's raving about techniques and stuff going on there. I think a lot of it has to do with how healthy Pollard is, which I think he'll be, that's going in the right direction. Schoonmaker, again, there's a lot of things going in a positive way. They got to figure out how to get him the ball in space by throwing it to him, whether it's screen packages or things like that.
That does it for us here today on the Love of the Star. Thank you so much for joining us. We'll continue with this roster inventory over the next couple weeks as we lead into training camp, and then we'll be out in Oxnard in a little over a month's time. And then we'll be hanging out with you guys from out there, continue to bring programs to you. For Brian Broaddus, I'm Bobby Belt. We will talk to you guys again later. Hey, thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please don't forget to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel for more content like this. If you want to see more of our videos, be sure to check out our playlist and let us know what you think in the comments below. Also, don't forget to follow us on social media to stay up to date on our latest updates. Links are in the description. Thanks again for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.